Today's example is going to be about Rotobrush. Rotobrush is kind of a combination masking tool slash green screen keying automation. It's all based on creating a mask based on textures and colors. It's a great idea. Doesn't always work that great, as we're going to see with this example. I'm told it can work better with better footage, but this basic idea is still there, and we're going to try to go through that exercise and get a sense of how it works. So we are in a project called Rotobrush, and we are starting a new composition, and I am going to call it Roto Spidey. Now, let's do this though. Let's set the frame rate for 30 frames a second, because I ran into a problem with Rotobrush using footage that was a different frame rate than my composition frame rate. So, and it said at the time it was 30. So set it for 30 and we should be good. All the rest is fine. 1920, 1080, a black background, all that's good. All right. So our background is going to be the building. So I'm going to drop it in first, and there's our building. Looks familiar. And then I'm going to drag the Roto Spider-Man on top of that to be in front of it. So Spidey's on top, New York building PNG's underneath. You'll notice that the footage of Spidey is not super long, so I would go to the last frame of Spidey be sitting there, and I would hit the letter N on your composition to sort of mark that this is the only section we care about. You could even enlarge it a little bit if you want. You're probably going to want to, because we're going to be moving one frame at a time eventually. I'm going to move. I think I'm going to move. Let me move this over. Heaven forbid. Why? Why are you moving over? Oh, oh. It's not letting me move it over. Okay, you suck. All right, well, scaling is still true. I want to be able to sort of see the individual frames. Now, if you play your footage, you'll see Spidey grasping the top of what's supposed to be the Washington Monument, which is not New York. I am aware of that. All right, and you have several things at play here that are very common in the world of green screen and Marvel movies and special effects. I said 30. I would do 30. 2997 might work, but it asked for 30 when I was testing this, so I just went with around 30. The exact 30, a round number 30. All right, so I got Spidey here, and you have several annoying things happening at the same time. We have wires, which we hope will go away when we get rid of the green. Well, that it'll hopefully be enough gone that it won't be there. And we've got a guy grabbing his butt, which is great for keeping him stable, really bad for making him look like a superhero. So we're going to want to remove these things. Now, we know that we could go in and we could do a pretty good green screen and we could try to get rid of some of this, and that would probably work okay. However, the point of this exercise is to use a different tool. So even though we're not going to get as good a result as we would if we just did some green screen, you would probably ultimately want to combine green screen with Rotobrush to make this work. But I don't want to get that complicated. I think once you see how this works, then you'll know enough to tinker with it and try it with different problems. So what we're going to do is we are going to double click the layer of Spider-Man. And when it loads it, when you double click it, it loads the clip up in the top in kind of a different mode. I don't completely understand how to explain this, but you're basically watching now just almost a more pure version of this top layer. Okay, and we're going to work on this layer. And the reason we're going to work on this layer is as we're painting, we don't want this stuff to sort of disappear. We want to be able to continue to see the green so that we can tell what should be removed and what should not. But the thing is, you're not going to see it get removed. You're only going to see a little like wireframe around what is being removed and what is not being removed. Okay, I'm going to show you what I mean. But the point is, we want to look at the raw while we're doing this effect, not have it disappear. So by double clicking it, we've sort of loaded now a second tab up here. So the comp Roto Spidey is the one below. The layer Roto Spider-Man is me just looking at this layer as I'm doing things to it. All right. Now we're going to use a different tool. We're going to go up to the toolbar and I am going to annotate. I could pick a different color. I don't know how to do that. All right. But we are going to use this tool right here. It's a little paintbrush next to a guy. Uh, yeah. So kind of looks like Spider-Man hanging off the side of a brush. That's what I'm going to call it, just because it's easier for me to remember. All right, that is our Rotobrush tool. We're going to select it, and just out of curiosity, if you hold the mouse down for a second, you'll see that it has two modes. It has the Rotobrush tool, which is its default, and then we have a Refine Edge tool, which is for getting a lot of detail work done. But we're not going to worry too much about that right now. Get Do Not Disturb up here so things stop popping up on my screen. Okay, so here's the deal. When we use this tool, we are going to draw what we want to include or keep, and we are going to exclude the things we don't. So when you hold down Alt, your little crosshairs, which are normally, with not holding anything down, a green sort of crosshair. Maybe, I don't know if there's any way for you to see it. There's no place on the screen. I'm putting it, no, you just can't see it. All right. But it turns red or green. There you can kind of see, maybe. It turns red or green based on whether you're adding to the mask or taking away from the mask. All right. So the main goal when it's green is to touch everything that you want to stick around. All right. Now, I have mine set to a very fine brush tip because that was the setting I was on last. Yours might have a little circle in the middle. I'm going to tell you how to enlarge the size of your brush. If you hold down Alt and Control at the same time, if you're on a Mac, it's Alt and Command at the same time, and you drag, you push the mouse forward, it will get bigger. If you pull back, it gets smaller, okay? So I would make it, I don't know, almost as big around as his eye holes are, the whites of his eyes. So now you should be able to see it on mine. So it's on his cheek. All right. So when I hold down Alt, it goes red. When I am not holding anything, it goes green. So I'm basically going to say, okay, I want to include everything that I'm going to draw a little bit on. And each time I let up from drawing, it will show me a little area that it has automatically masked out. So let's make sure that you're on the first frame because it does like to work from the first frame forward. Unlike some of the motion tracking where you can go backwards, this doesn't really work that way. Okay. Alt and Control on a PC should be, are you on a PC, Nico? All right, then try the other one. I know it's going to be Alt. Is there another keyboard combination of, like I have Alt and Command or Alt and Control as my options on a Mac. On a PC, usually anything that's a command is the Control key, but you're telling me it's not. You do have to click as you do it. So as you push forward, I'm holding down Alt and Command on a Mac, and it's getting bigger or smaller with my mouse pushing forward and back. I don't know. Yeah, you had to click. Yeah, it's weird. Sorry if I didn't say that clearly. All right, cool. So once you get the brush at a size that is manageable, then our goal is to sort of draw on everything we want to stick around. So let's start with his head. So I'm on the first frame of my animation or my clip, and I'm going to sort of draw a chunk of his head. Now it's paying attention to color and shadow and things like that. So notice I just did a little bit of a circle on his face and it went, oh, all of this, but it overshot a little bit, right? We can actually see, maybe you can on my screen, that it has included the little chunk of green between the wire and the back of his head here. I don't want that, so I'm going to hold down Alt to change my cursor to red, and I'm going to paint a little in there. And all I did was one little click, and it went, oh, exclude all this green, okay. And it did a pretty good job of excluding that now. All right. So this is like the world's simplest coloring book, okay? You're just going to basically say, include this, include a little of this, include some of his hand. Oh, too much, undo, let's go back. Include this, include this, include this. Oh, too much, undo. And you basically just keep including, and anything that gets included that you didn't intend, then you use the Alt to make a negative to get rid of it. All right, the entire Washington Monument counts. So I just drew a little bit in there. I do a little bit of his fingers over here. It did a pretty good job on his fingers. But I do have some flaws, like this whole section under his arm. So I'm going to hold down Alt and click in there, and I'm going to exclude that green section from him. Now I am going to make my brush a little smaller because I've got some motion blur going on this hand. And when I did a stamp this big, it grabbed all this stuff that I didn't want. So I'm going to do both the Alt and Command together on my Mac. Hopefully you guys are getting it to work on your PC. And I'm going to make my tip a little smaller so that I have a little more control over how much, too much, how much of this I'm grabbing. Too much, too much, too much. This is where you get to see how sucky it actually is. Were you on the Rotobrush tool, the little dude with the painting brush on his feet? Mine was a circle because I made it bigger. It looked like 4 crosshairs before I actually did the hold the keys together and make the brush tip bigger. So you may need to, again, figure out what the keyboard combination is for making it bigger. And I'm sorry, I don't know. I assumed it would translate. Every other keyboard command that I've done worked. Does anybody working with a PC and it's working for you? Can you speak up and tell us what your keyboard combination was to get the brush size to shrink and grow?
Yeah, mine worked. I used Alt and Control and just start dragging the brush.
And as you push the mouse forward and back, it gets bigger and smaller.
You can also go over to brushes here and just change the diameter of it.
Ah, where are the brush controls?
It's right underneath the paint controls over here on the right. So you see paint and content aware fill and character and all of those.
Yes.
Maybe it's set up differently on you guys' computers,
No,
but
I wasn't seeing right here. All right, so screw the keyboard shortcut if it's not working for you. Here's where brush controls are. Fantastic, great, great suggestion. Thank you, Joseph. All right, so if at any point you want to see how good or bad you're doing, you can jump back to the comp and you'll see the combined elements. Not great. So I've got a phantom hand down here grabbing his butt. So I know I've got to go back into that other tab, and then I'm going to hold down Alt and I'm going to paint away that little portion that was annoying. Now, remember, you can zoom in. So if I want to enlarge my scene, and if you remember, we hold down the space bar and it will give us the hand tool, and then we can move things around. So it may make sense to go in and try and get this to work this way. His hand is a nightmare. It just does not work. But what you'll notice is as you jump from frame to frame, it tries to remember what you set. So his butt is all fine, his legs are fine, his other arm is fine, his head is actually pretty good until we get further in. So this is why you would bother to use this tool. It's actually doing the best job it can to be able to try and keep the mask clean for you without you having to draw it over again every frame. All right. But you do have to keep using this tool to fix it. So if frame one, let's say I just live with frame one with his hand looking jacked up, and I go to the next frame, it's even worse. The next frame, oh, I've almost completely lost stuff. I don't want that. So I'm going to fix it. So I'm on this frame. Now I'm going to go in and I'm going to fix it. I'm going to say include this wrist part, include his hand up this high, but then exclude this green in between here. That's not good. That's not bad. If you're on your keyboard has a page up and page down, you can go one frame using those keys, or you can use the mouse to just control things down here. But the hope is that it will track most of the time for you, and that you'll only have to fix the imperfections, the imperfect moments. All right, so it's doing a sort of decent job. As I'm going forward, I have to wait for each frame to render. I'm getting impatient. I'm jumping too fast. All right, but just work your way through the timeline. Now see, I've lost a little too much of his back here. So I'm going to include a little and hope that it doesn't grab the green behind him. Thanks. I don't know what is happening. All right. But the point is, this is an arduous task, and you just have to keep going in and fixing whatever it misses. But it's better than having to hand mask it every single frame. It's trying to pay attention and remember, oh, he wanted this kind of texture earlier, so maybe he'll want it again. Yeah, when his back starts to show, all hell breaks loose here. All right, so you just keep going, and it just is disappointing after disappointing after disappointing. Now, the biggest problem with this particular exercise example is that you have this tiny thin little margin where his legs are almost touching the top of this obelisk, I believe is the term. And you've got some pretty intense motion blur, which makes some of his hand moves just really fall apart. But, you know, people who do this a lot, they'll tend to, which is fine. It's just, it doesn't have to be that deliberate of a stroke. So I'm going to, again, I'm going to go back here. I'm going to show you how this plays so far. It's not bad when he actually gets to the point where he's just sitting there. But see, at some point it completely freaks out, right? My whole background just freaks out. It just goes away. So I'm not sure exactly why, but I've seen it do that before. So I need to find the next frame that it loses itself, which is probably here. And then and then I got to freaking do it again. Say, no, I'm paying attention to this guy right here. See him? Yep. His arms are up here. See him? See him? See him? And this arm. His legs down here. His butt. And his back. Like all of that. Count it. Pretty good. And then, yep, exclude the whole. Exclude the whole. It's not terrible. And again, if I go back to the comp, now anytime we do a mask, we expect to have some controls over it. So if you go to the effects controls, if you don't already have it up, it may have come up when you were adding these effects. But there is a feathering control, which is going to help a lot, right? So I blur the edges of it, and it's going to look far more organic. Get the hiccups, awesome. There we go. So I'm going back to this, although, again, his hand is showing up. Lose the hand on the butt. There we go. So yeah, see how as I feathered it, it actually is not terrible. It's not great. It's not terrible. I'm also missing the obelisk. Maybe I have that. Maybe that's not the right word. There he is. There he is. That looks mediocre. But yes, you can go in, you can increase contrast, you can shift the edge, which is going to make it fatter or tighter. So if you've been doing kind of a rough job, you need to choke it in a little bit, you can do that. Reduce chatter. I don't know. Apparently, if the computer gets real chatty on you, I don't really understand that. You can use motion blur, which might help with some of the movements around, might make it look a little better. And then, of course, this is just a layer like anything else. So I can go into transform and I can say, well, what if I want to position him differently? You know, what if I don't want it to fight the building? I want it to be more like this, or I could totally put it over here. Maybe you would do something cool over here. I don't know. The point is, I have some control. And of course, if I really want it to be even more believable, not that it's ever going to be believable, but if I wanted to, I could create a null, right? Let's do that. You don't have to do this. If you want to follow along, that's great. You finish drawing him in the first frame, and then when you go to the next frame, you'll notice that what you drew tries to track with what's going on. It's trying to sort of follow with the shape of the person you just highlighted. So just by going to the next frame, you'll see it change shape and attempt to try to do the work for you. So I didn't actually track it. It's doing it automatically from the start frame. So you start with the first one. There may be a way to work backwards, but in my experience, it always tends to really want to go from a certain point forward. I've had very poor luck trying to go backwards. I thought I fixed that frame. Maybe I did not. Oh, so I was going to say, I'm going to do make this feel a little like it's being controlled by hand, just to test myself. So I'm going to do a new null object, and I'm going to go to the scale, and I'm going to scale it up a little bit to like 110. I'm going to marry the Spider-Man and the building to my null. And then the position controls. Alt click. We want to wiggle. Which I need to go steal that from last week. Wiggle parentheses colon. I bet when I start typing, it's going to try to help me. Wiggle. And then we'll do small number 2 by 50. We'll see what we get. All right, my scale isn't quite enough for what I did, so I'm going to do 120. And now when I play it, it kind of feels like a handheld shot because everything's moving together. The background and the foreground, because I married them both to the null and I gave it a slight wiggle. It's got kind of a handheld feel now, which starts to make the comp more believable. Even though it's a crummy key. Any questions before I stop recording? Any questions that should be answered on the recording for all of you to hear when you go back and listen to this later? All right, I'm going to stop recording.